How long did you, when did you move to America?
A little over 8 years ago. It was the end of 2011, December 2011, when I came to the States. I went to Notre Dame. I started an MFA in creative writing there. Um, yeah, so that's when I came, and I graduated May of 2014, and then I moved to Ames, Iowa, with my wife, where she started a PhD program, and then I came to St. Louis in the fall of 2016. And I started a PhD program, and now I'm still in the program. Um, I'm doing comparative literature at Washington University in St. Louis. Um, they started this new track. It's called International Writers Track, so comparative literature International Writers Track. And what they do is they accept writers, translators, poets, fiction writers, and so you take the more or less the same courses as the regular comparative literature track, and but you can have a hybrid dissertation, um, a creative piece plus an academic component. So that gives me and the writers an opportunity to work on our creative projects. So that's, yeah, it's pretty cool.
And so, do you still have family in Iran, or?
Yeah, almost all my family is back there. Yeah, my mother, my brother, and his wife, my stepfather, everybody.
They're doing okay, because you kind of hear like bits and pieces of what other countries are dealing with right now.
They are doing okay, and by okay I mean they haven't they haven't gotten the infection yet, which is pretty great.
Right.
But they have been quarantining themselves for a long time. Although things started kind of opening up 2 or 3 weeks ago,
Okay.
and yeah, so my brother had to go to work. My mother is staying home. She had a knee replacement surgery on both her knees early last fall. So she had to, before the virus, and so she had to stay at home for a long time to kind of recover, and then she had to go to on daily walks for the joints for the prosthetic joints to start working. So she kind of has a practice that kind of quarantining a little bit before that. I think so. So I guess she kind of got used to that situation, but she had to cut on her walks after the pandemic. But it seems like the country is opened up now. We'll see how where the data goes, and like if there's going to be a surge or not. Hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to, I guess, on Friday. They're doing in phases. North Carolina is going to be opening, and we're not going to be doing the store yet, but it feels really soon. So hopefully it's not.
Yeah, plans for when you're going to open up, like maybe limit the number of people you're going to get let in.
Yeah, we're going to try and do it by appointment. And then it's only like a handful of people will be able to be in here. I don't know how it's going to work. It'll be nice to have people in the store again. But then it just feels really, I don't know, it's just everything's so weird. It's hard to know how to feel about anything these days. And I also feel like, because this is your debut novel, and so I assume you have like a big book tour planned, and that all got kind of set aside.
I had some events. I wouldn't call it a big tour, maybe because it was my debut novel. I had something actually here in St. Louis and something in LA, and they were talking about another event in Boston. But we had to do the Left Bank book event here, the launch event online. It was on Facebook, which was good actually. And then the other got canceled. So yeah, some of it got canceled. Actually, so that was interesting because because I was looking at what was happening in China and then Iran. It was I think a week or two before the the pandemic. It was not a pandemic then.
Right.
The virus became a problem here in the States. So I was looking at the data and I kind of so I emailed Left Bank and was like, so there's a possibility that we're gonna have to cancel this. Um, we want to think about maybe online options. Um, and then we ended up doing that. But I think my point is that was a little bit of a less shock because I had data. I was looking at like how things were going I was looking at the charts from China and Iran and looking at the graphs here and like, okay, so we're pretty much going the same direction. So there's a good chance that this is gonna get canceled. So I think I kind of mentally was prepared for this thing to happen. I mean, I was not happy about it. I was like, yeah, just
Right.
great. One time I published a novel for the first time. I spent like 6-7 years on this, and then now we have this. But my point is that I had some mental preparation for this, and I was thinking, oh, I think it would be nice if I could have like this kind of charts and data for the rest of my life. If something catastrophic is going to happen, it's going to be good if I have some data to look, oh, this is going to happen to me according to the data, so I can prepare.
So it sounds like you were watching this pretty, I don't know how early on, but if you were like looking at charts and stuff, I know I was like seeing the charts, but I wasn't really paying attention to them. And I guess I had like an inclination that something was going to come along, but it's so hard to like imagine this happening.
Yeah, I was following the news and looking at the data. So maybe I'm thinking for my academic stuff at school, I'm starting to dipping a toe in digital humanities. So like kind of data and graphs and charts and stuff like that. So maybe I'm a little bit more alert about the reading data. Like I'm interested in data visualization. So yes, I was looking at the charts, and I was not 100% sure that United States is going to have the same pattern exactly, because it's a different country. It's well, yeah, I wasn't sure if it's going to be exactly the same, but there was a chance that the graph was going to act the same way as Iran and China, and a little bit later Italy. But yeah, I was following.
Yeah, I feel as far as like books go, I feel really, I don't know if sad's the right word. I feel bad for the author, like the debut authors, and or just anybody has a book coming out, because you see how much time like somebody spends with something. Like you mentioned, it was 6 or 7 years, and then you're finished and it's getting published, and this once in a century thing happens. Not to bring things down.
Well, yeah, I mean, I try to look at, this is not my strong suit, but I try to look at the kind of positive aspects of it too, because there are, like when things kind of moved online, it feels like some people are going to have access to some of these events that, or I may have access to some events that otherwise I wouldn't have, perhaps. I don't know if this hadn't happened, if we would be having this conversation, personally, me, North Carolina, or some of my friends in Phoenix, Arizona, would have been able to see me talk, when my book launched, you know. So there is that aspect to it too. But on the other hand, I remember like last year, at least a year ago. I was at Barnes and Noble actually, and I was looking at a shelf that had like pachinko in it, and I was like, oh my god, I so want my book to be like on this shelf, maybe like here next to this book. And I'm thinking this could have happened if it hadn't been for this virus. And like in general, I so wanted to walk into bookstores and perhaps see my book, or in general um, like see my book here and there, you know, in like the physically. Uh, but that kind of went out the window for now. Um, and I'm not sure if I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, it's there are there are some good things that, well, you know, people I think adapt themselves. You know, human beings are very resilient and adaptive, so we tend to adapt ourselves to hard situations. But yeah, it was a downer.
Well, um, maybe we can talk. We can try and raise the mood and talk about the book a little bit. So it's kind of like a multi-generational saga. I don't know if that would be the right description for it, but where did the idea from it come? Is there anything specific, or was it based on your family at all, or?
Um, no, it's not based on my family. I don't have a specifically large family. So this came into being in a in multiple stages and phases. So I before this, I was a short story writer, and the way I wrote was that I usually had one image, one central image that I thought, oh, this is nice, and I would sit and kind of write around it. And I kind of started the novel like that. I had this image of cats doing crazy stuff, plotting things in the city, and there's like all conspiracies, having a hand behind everything that happens in the contemporary Iranian history. And then I was like, yeah, this is great. Let me write it. So I sat down to write, and like very soon I realized that this is not how you write a novel. You can't do that. I need to have a plan. Um, so I sat down. I kind of structured the book. Uh, at first, I had 10 chapters and 5 historical chapters, 5 more recent. And the historical chapters each landed on a critical historical um, time period in Iran. Um, World War II, the 1953 coup, 1979 revolution, the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, and the 2009 presidential protests. And we alternate between these historical, kind of more recent chapters. Um, and then I had it read by some people, and it seemed like the structure was not working, and some of the comments were like I'd taken too much for granted. So an average reader who's not familiar with Iran would miss a lot. So I kind of scrapped half of the book and condensed the other half that I had, and started again. Kind of felt like I was writing a second novel, and little by little bit, this voice came around. This voice of the narrator that's kind of omniscient and is a little bit distant. So part of that was because of this voice, I think, that allowed itself to move um, into the future, into the past, and allowed itself to distance itself to look at the history as a whole, or like go down into the headspace of characters and tell the reader about their thoughts and feelings. So that flexibility kind of allowed me to go into different characters' life stories and I think kind of organically it the this kind of um, thread came out to be. I mean, the book, the novel started to be this kind of family saga. Um, I can talk more about it, about the reason that like one of the thoughts behind this not being about perhaps like one person, and why I thought it was a good idea to have different stories. But yeah, I'm gonna stop here. I don't want to ramble on and see where we're going with this.
No, you're welcome to ramble as much as you want. But my, I guess it's my question. You talked about writing this like first draft of your novel and then almost rewriting the whole thing. Was that a hard decision to make? Because I always feel like it would be like maybe parts of what make writers are when they know when to like, they can put hours and hours and hours and weeks or even years worth of work into something and realize it's not worth pursuing anymore, or maybe worth restarting in a different way. Um, was that a difficult decision?
It was very hard. It was excruciating. I'm a type of person like that like when I finish something, I'm like, I want this on the shelf next week. This is amazing. And I usually feel good about the last thing that the thing that I'm writing, or the very last thing that I've written. I never think before that is like that's not, I mean, no, this last one, this is great. Anything that I wrote before that is not worth it. And so I'm very excited usually about what I write and what I finish. Um, so it was very, very difficult to bring myself to the point where I thought I had to do this over again. And it was not like some light revisions. Actually, it did feel like a second novel to me. Um, so yeah, um, but like as I wrote a little bit into it very early on into the second draft, I felt like this was a different novel, and I felt really good about it, and and I did feel like that it was becoming a better novel than the first draft. So that was something that helped me go on. Plus, I liked it. I liked the idea, and I wanted to I wanted to finish it. So I think the second draft went went very well because I felt very good about it. And the thing is that like the other thing that happened was that I kind of disciplined myself the way that I did not with the first draft or ever before. Meaning I set a goal of 500 words a day, no matter what. So I would get up in the morning. I'm not a morning person, but I would get up. I was going to school, and so I said like 8 to 11 every day in the morning. So I would get up like 6:30, be at the library by 8, and write until like 11. My 500 words. There were days that like I would finish a little bit earlier, but it would usually take me like 3 hours. Some days I would write more than 500. But that was very, very helpful before I got like my mind got distracted with other things. I would just like get into the world of the novel and do my daily quota. That was very helpful. So that I think that helped with the second draft also.
You mentioned that the novel kind of, there was like this initial like image of the cats, and then you realized you couldn't really build a novel around that. But I assume you had maybe teased out some ideas from that original like attempt, or did you like build on top of those things, or just realize what you were doing wrong?
Um, well, that image was not supposed to be the main the kind of major theme of the novel because I didn't want to do something like out and out fantasy. Um, so the cats were supposed to be there, but I wanted for the novel to be grounded more in reality or in kind of more realistic than kind of fantasy. So that's why even from the beginning I knew that I had more like people stories than cat stories.
Right.
Um, but so yeah, the thing interesting about that was I wanted to have something that reads like when you read it, you don't feel. I didn't want to write an Allison in Wonderland, you know. Uh, so it's like should cats talk? And then soon I realized no talking cats, you know, no talking animals. So like my point is that striking that balance between the real and the unreal, fantastic, was difficult, um, especially because I was writing about a country, about a culture where that a lot of people, that a lot of my average readers, I thought would not be very familiar with. Um, That'd be kind of funny. This story. I was working at uh, the library at Notre Dame when I was starting to write this novel, and one day I had this coworker, this undergrad student. Um, One day we were talking and she asked me like what are you up to, what do you do, and I told her that I'm thinking of starting a novel, and she asked me what's it about, and I told her that I have this image of these cats, this train of cats, you know, that goes around the country and cats get on and off and do weird stuff. And she asked, is this something that exists in Iran? And I thought, oh my God, even such an outlandish image may seem to some people like not. I mean, it's hard. It may be hard for some people to place it on the real fantastic spectrum, you know. So I thought I had to first kind of build my real world in the novel, and then kind of push towards the unreal. Um, so yeah, that balance was difficult to strike. But I think if you read the novel now, you would think that like it's more grounded in reality. And there was something else also when I workshopped it um, here at WashU in Catherine David's workshop. Actually, like many people were like, we need more cats in this. So yeah, I think some people wanted more of the fantastic.
Well, I was reading some reviews, and there's a lot of the term magical realism gets used a lot, and I'm never. I feel like that's a term that kind of goes in and out of fashion, and I'm never like as a reader, I have a certain like idea of what that is. How do you feel about that word? Do you feel like it suits your work, or is it?
Um, I don't feel like an expert to talk about like magic realism in general. Right? It I think after this book, um, after I wrote this, I feel like that the word magic realism here seems to have some connotations that I was not aware of, and some of it is like it's close to escapism. Someone asked me, I think it was Catherine actually, who asked me if I think magic realism is kind of, there's an element of escapism in it, and I think it gets closer to some um, maybe what's the word? Some more fantastic genres, science fiction, fantasy. Um, But for me, it was a kind of, I don't want to use, like the word that came to my mind was legit, but yeah, that's not the word that I want to use. Something like literary, um, serious, literary genre, and for me, it's a technique that you can use to various effects. It's not necessarily just to escape into a world, escape like out of reality into a fantastic world. Um, so I think you can achieve different means, different things with it. Um, anyway, uh, yeah, I was thinking that these tools, like these are tools that you could use to different effects. Um, and something that I was hoping to achieve with this, uh, with the magic realism kind of tools here, was uh, hopefully to kind of bring up questions about history, about the concept of history and its constructedness, the way that uh, the novel claims that cats were behind everything that happened in Iran. Um, so kind of questions like, is the what we think as history, what is it that are there things that has been left out of this narrative of history, whatever it is? Are there things that we haven't talked about? Or has there been any misappropriations, misrepresentations? And kind of bringing attention to the fact that history also is a narrative and uses narrative techniques, just like uh, fiction does. Uh, for example, you pick certain events out of the spectrum that is life and string them together and create a narrative. You put a beginning, put an end to it, to whatever history it is, and you make something the theme or the hero, or you write about someone, and has a beginning and end. So all of these are things that you create. Life is not all about such and such person. Life does not begin at a certain period and does not end at a certain period. It's a spectrum. So one reason behind the fact that I have multiple narratives and multiple characters, the fact that it's a family saga, the fact that it's not about one person as a hero of the novel, is that is exactly the same fact that every all of these characters in the novel, I feel like, could be the heroes and heroines of their own lives. They could have their own novels. So it's a kind of statement that I'm hoping that the novel is making. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, and it has me thinking. And I might be like trying to bridge some things that aren't there, but you obviously wrote a lot of this in America, and I'm thinking of, like, you mentioned the person that, like, it seems to be a kind of a theme of like Americans reading the book and realizing how little they know of like Iranian history. And I'm sitting here thinking about, like, I probably fall into that boat too. Like, what I know is mostly from movies that I've seen, and I think there's a very like official like American United States government kind of narrative to what has happened in the Middle East. Was that in any way like something that came into your mind when you were writing this, or am I way off base and making things up? Or?
No. You're really on point. That was one of my dilemmas. Actually, I was trying not to teach my reader about Iran. So my main concern was to write a good novel that is that's a good read and it's enjoyable to read, right? Like first and foremost. So I was really concerned about the fictional world. So I wanted to create this world that is that makes sense um, as a fictional universe with a lot of real actual things from Iran, but some a magical, non-real thing. So creating this world was this cohesive world was my main uh, concern. Um, I was so one another thing that I was trying to do by doing um, this magical realism thing was kind of to push politics and history to the background. So this is, I think, some people categorize the novel in like as historical fiction, um, which makes sense. Um, but I think the novel it could be categorized as historical fiction, but the logic of the novel has been pushed towards the myth or mythology a little bit. So it's a mythological logic as opposed to historical logic somewhat. So it feels like to me, at least that's what I was trying to do, to um, kind of like isolate this area, this culture, whatever, this country, and a little bit disconnected from the world. It's not 100%. So that to me was part of the logic of the kind of myth logic. In a lot of cultures, we see that they have there are words for people from that culture and people from like anywhere else. Like we have like Iran, like in there in Persian, there's a word for Iran, Iranian, and whoever else who's not Iranian. Like um, there's the word like barbarian. I think in English that I think it was used for anywhere who's not from the culture world. So that's part of the logic. And one reason to do that was to push history, the actual history, and politics to the background. Um, the novel is not supposed to have historical like claims of historical veracity. I don't. So I try to stick to the historical. So if you someone tries to trace the um, trace the events, the historical events, they should be able to pretty accurately find them on the real historical map. But like one reason you don't see a lot of like dates in the novel or a lot of actual names like historical characters is exactly that thing. And so part of it was because you mentioned like in movies and mainstream representations of Iran and Iranian culture. So that's something that I was hoping to work a little bit against, um, meaning the discourse that Middle Eastern man or Middle Eastern people oppressing Middle Eastern people. So look how a lot of discourses or the depictions of the culture from that area is like we see a lot of like oppression, we see a lot of nasty things that Middle Eastern people do to themselves, right? And then that would open up legitimization of kind of other discourses where we need to save them from themselves, which in its like very radical um, forms could take the shape of military actions in the area. So I was hoping to write a little bit against that discourse of look how they're being, how they're oppressing their own people. So that was part of the reason that um, that politics and history was a little bit getting pushed into the um, into the background. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that does make sense because I'm thinking of. I'm sure other people do this. I've never. There's so many different cultures and countries and peoples that I feel like we only think of in terms of like big historical events. So like when you mentioned like World War II, Iranian Revolution, all of these things, and like those are like the bullet points that we know, which I think is natural. Like it's huge events and things like that, and it kind of keeps us from really understanding cultures or understanding like that underneath all of these big historical events, there's people involved and just who want to live their life every day.
Exactly. Yeah, that was actually. I think I could have done even more of that. I mean, still, when you read the novel, you see a lot of, because the novel kind of climaxes at the revolution, the 1979 revolution. So you do see a lot of you see unrest, protests in the street, and you see the revolution. But you also see a lot of like people just doing their own things in their lives. But I still like going off of what you were saying. I still think I could have even done a little bit more of that. Hopefully in the next novel.
Do you have an idea for the next novel, or is that
It's
already working on it?
I'm not. I started working on it last fall, but then what happened was that, like, first, okay, 2020 happened. First, there was the U.S.-Iran kind of escalation where the Iran in general got killed, and then so I was sure that a war had started between the two countries. So that was
Yeah, I remember when that happened and everybody was obviously like a very big deal, and now like I was reminded of it a few weeks ago and I was like, oh yeah, that happened. Like it seems so like in the distant past and not even like a consideration for us anymore.
yeah. And there was the World War III hashtag going on. It was trending on Twitter. Uh,
Yeah.
well, for a little bit, I was distracted with that, and I wrote a piece that came out in the New Yorker about that. So that took some time, and then the pandemic happened. And there was schoolwork a little bit. So I'm not working on it right now, but I have some thoughts of writing about. Uh, okay, it's going to be the same about the war, the Iran-Iraq war, but again with a hopefully trying to look at it in a different way, not to make it about the war. So yeah, that's something that I have in mind, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, I I think it's interesting. I'm curious what kind of. I was talking to another author on here last week, and he was talking about how his friends who write, they're like they were in the middle of writing things that are contemporary, and now they're feeling like everything they're writing has to be set in like 2017 because that's when you could still have people like interacting with each other and things were normal. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of historical fiction because nobody really knows what now looks like anymore.
Yeah, or maybe post-apocalyptic novel where people are not getting closer than 6 feet to each other. But
Well,
yeah,
I think it's been funny. Like, there's been so many dystopian novels, and I mean, I guess there's still time for everything to kind of fall apart and unravel. But so far, it's just been everybody's been very, for the most part, very calm and just
and I
taking
think
care of each other, which is less exciting than like Road Warrior. But
and I think you need, at least I do. I need some time to think about something that happens. So like if I'm ever gonna write about the pandemic, it's gonna be 10 years from now. But there's this other thing too that I feel like it works um, in the other direction. Like I'm feeling like if I'm writing about, so I was thinking about the idea of the war, the novel during the war, And I kind of caught myself um, thinking a little bit about this current situation of this pandemic. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of this actually seeps, like kind of creeps its way to kind of more historical settings and writing. I think there's this is not my word, my sentence, but someone said it, that every history is present history. Uh, so uh, meaning that you project your thoughts, the way the kind of prominent thoughts of your present to your writing about the past. So there's I mean, again, I wouldn't be surprised if me or even other writers kind of um, internalize this pandemic logic in different ways and use it in writing about even like historical things in very subtle ways that may not be very apparent at first. So like my point is that it works. It works maybe like both ways, from present to past or future.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what comes out of all of this, especially as far as writing goes, because I feel like, and I'm sure this isn't true of every writer, but for a lot of them, I think they are used to being kind of in isolation to an extent. Like it's very solitary. Writing is solitary work to begin with. And I feel like if you're a professional writer, you probably have a pretty good routine of like you were saying, like at least 3 hours set aside every day where I don't talk to anybody. I'm just in my own head writing. And so I'm curious, like, what's going to come out of it, if there's going to be stuff that comes out of it, because I think it's also really hard right now to be creative or to focus on things that are heavier than just watching television. I know that's been hard for me personally and some other people I know. So
Yeah,
it'll be interesting. Like that's kind of interesting to see what comes out of this, as different as everything's going to look. So
yeah, exactly. It's very difficult for me too to sit and concentrate. You know, even the space. You know, I lost my cubicle at the library, so I can't go there and just sit on the couch and write. It's not it's not the best place to concentrate.
yeah, there's so much of like people's habits and everything's just been upended, and I think there's always this kind of sense that things will be normal any minute now, and but the people I know that have done the best during this are the ones that have been able to kind of create new habits and thrive during this. It's very tricky. It's a very hard thing to do right now, though. So
And some people get, I think, annoyed by advice like that. You know, like this is the best time, you know, for creating stuff. You know, just you have the time and space, sit and write and be productive. And not everybody can do that.
well, there's
Understand?
that thing going around about like Shakespeare wrote King
Yeah,
Lear, and it's like, well, he probably would have done that anyway, and he also like you can look at the other stuff that he wrote. It wasn't like an accident that happened, and so it's a lot of like pressure to.
yes, and there was this piece that I didn't get to read, but I read just the headline that like he had perhaps like a patron and some support during that time that he was writing that. Um, that's part of I think that's kind of connecting to the cats. That's part of the things that get that are left out of history, like what the what gets broadcast is like Shakespeare wrote this in quarantine, so you sit and write your King Lear in quarantine.
Right.
But you don't see the cats. You know, you don't see the support that he had. Maybe I mean, I'm like because I didn't read that the piece. I can't say for sure. But if that's true, you don't see those cats in that story. Um,
Or the guy next door who was writing really terrible plays.
exactly. yeah. So that's all about the success story, because we have this one model that was successful, so everybody should try to be like that, which is not necessarily bad, but if you can't do that, it also should be understandable why you can't write during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot, and it's surreal and hard, but we, yeah. I don't have anything more profound to say than that. I've been trying to like think of positive stuff, but it's tricky. It's hard. And but like you said, there's a lot of good opportunity. Like this conversation would be happening without it, and who knows what the world will look like without everyone at home right now. So
Yeah, there are good things.
yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining me. I actually have to go home in a minute, which is really exciting. Um, but I want to thank you for being flexible with us and for
Thank you.
scheduling.
Thank you for your time and for having me in your store virtually.
Yeah.
I hope there's some time that we can meet actually in person.
Yes. Anytime you're here in this part of the world, you can let me know, and
I will.
maybe I'll be in St. Louis. I don't know
Let me
what
know.
the
Yeah.
future holds.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll get this to you when we get it edited and ready and on the internet. And,
Great. It was great talking to you,
you
Justin.
too. Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Have a good day.
All right. You too. Thanks.